Tags, and most recently, the Name and Land podcast. Please welcome to the stage, Bakari.
Good morning. Good morning. I don't think they know this here at the Urban League, but I absolutely, speaking at breakfast is one of the worst speaking spots you can have. When I creep back in here, I saw some of y'all at the bar last night, so I know that waking up early is kind of difficult. But I'm glad to be here. It is an honor and a privilege and a pleasure and every other adjective to describe how I feel about being here with you all today, particularly during this time. There is going to be a period, I believe, where we can have Q&A, as I was told, where you all can, I remind people I'm only 41 years old, and so I haven't been in politics yet long enough to lie to you, so you can ask me anything that your heart desires. And this morning, I am going to treat you all a lot like Elizabeth Taylor treated all 7 of her husbands, and that means I'm not going to keep you long, but I do think it's important and necessary that we, particularly during this time, have a conversation. I am very cognizant about quoting King. In fact, it's not something that I do often at all. I believe that King's legacy has been so whitewashed and bastardized that I refuse to quote him often in different settings. But I think to frame the discussion, I think it's important that we remember one of King's speeches that I don't actually find to be a great piece of oratory, but others do. It's his I Have a Dream speech. In fact, I don't think it was a great piece of oratory because King actually had given that speech a few weeks earlier at a union hall in Detroit, Michigan. And King, being a great Baptist minister, was looking out on the mall and realized that he was not moving the crowd as he thought he should. And there was a young lady behind him named Mahalia Jackson who echoed out, "Tell them about that dream you had, King." And then he went into this rhythmic cadence of "I have a dream that one day we shall." And people get caught up in that rhythmic cadence, but they forget about the most important part of that speech, which frames the discussion we're going to have today. The most important part of that speech is when King talked about the fierce urgency of now. The fierce urgency of now. See, a lot of you all begin to try to eat elephants whole. A lot of you all begin to plot out programs and lives for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years down the road and forget about that fierce urgency of the moment that we're in. And so for the purpose of this conversation and the purpose of where we are in our history in this country, I want us to be consumed by the now. But in order to do that, you have to ask yourself 2 very simple questions. And this is when some of you all, I've seen some of your business cards and they got all these letters behind them and all of these adjectives up under them. But I'm going to apologize beforehand for bombarding you with questions that are rooted in such simplicity, but they're necessary to answer as we're consumed in the now. The first question is, how far have we come? And the next question is, where do we go from here? And I love framing conversations because no matter if you're trying to be a better director or a better executive or even a better husband or wife, I think these 2 questions are the most important questions you can ask yourself. During those moments of introspection, which I hope we still have, these 2 questions are just that important, and particularly for this audience, for this organization that means so much to our communities. I think it's important that we ask, how far have we come, and where do we go from here? So if we're going to be consumed in the now and we ask ourselves, how far have we come, it's important to utilize historical context to frame the discussion. How many of you all know the name George Elmore? Raise your hand. George was so fair-skinned in 1946 that he could pass for being white. But George was what they deemed to be a Renaissance Negro. Because George owned a 5 and dime store, he owned a liquor store, he drove a cab, and he took pictures on the side. But in 1946, George decided he was going to go down and get his voter registration card. And when he went to get his voter registration card, they actually gave George his voter registration card. But in August of that year, when he went down to cast his ballot, who were the nosiest people in all the world? Poll workers. In fact, I believe in order to be a poll worker, the job description says nosy as hell. And they looked at George and they say, we know you're a Negro, you can't vote here. But George was filled with faith. He was filled with audacity, and George filed this lawsuit known as Elmore versus Rice. But as soon as he filed the lawsuit, they stopped distributing to his five and dime store. They firebombed his liquor store, and his wife literally died in a mental health hospital from undergoing the trauma of the crosses being burned on her yard, etc. George Elmore died literally a very broken man, financially, emotionally, but Elmore versus Rice is the reason that African Americans can vote in the primary system in this country. So when you frame the discussion like that, you can ask yourself, how far have we come? How many of you all know the name Sarah Mae Fleming? Oh, well, it's going to be fun this morning. Sarah Mae Fleming is one of my favorite people. She is a heroine. Sarah Mae Fleming was a 22-year-old domestic worker who she and her girlfriend used to do the back-breaking generational work of cleaning up hotels. And one day in 1954, they got off work and got on the bus. Back then, the buses were owned by utility companies, but her sin wasn't sitting at the front of the bus. Her sin was when the bus driver told her to get off the bus. She went out the front door that the whites use instead of the back door that the colors were supposed to use. And the bus driver grabbed her by the back of the neck, punched her in the stomach, and rolled her down the steps. The great irony of Sarah's story is that if you don't remember anything else I say here today, Sarah wasn't looking to make history, but instead history found her. I don't know how many of you all have people in your lives that speak in parables, like they don't speak in complete sentences. Well, I had a person in my life like that as well. And in 2016, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, I had an opportunity to speak at the DNC on Thursday night before a young lady named Hillary Rodham Clinton. And as I was standing on my X, prepared to go out onto the stage, I heard this booming voice behind me from John Lewis. And I've known John my entire life. And they call me Little CL after my dad. And he said, Little CL, be prepared to walk onto the pages of history. And he turned and walked away. That was the entire conversation. But it put me in the mind frame of Sarah Mae Fleming because she was being prepared to walk onto the pages of history. And even a better example is, I am the furthest thing from a pastor. If anybody's ever seen me drink tequila, they'll tell you that. But in the book of Isaiah, when Isaiah is in the full awe and glory of the Lord, and the question is asked, who shall go for me? And Isaiah says, y'all don't go to church today? Here am I, Lord, send me. Some of y'all need to wake up on Wednesdays and go to Bible study. Here am I, Lord, send me. See, Sarah wasn't looking to make history that day like many of you all in this room, but instead you answer the call like she did, which says, here am I, Lord, send me. And she joined with some young enterprising lawyers from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and Sarah Mae Fleming laid the foundation in action and law for another young lady who sat down 18 months later named Rosa Parks. So again, ask yourself the very simple question, how far have we come? And last but not least, I'd say Harry and Eliza Briggs, who were born not far from where I'm from. They were in Clarendon County, South Carolina, and they simply wanted their kids in 1949 to have access to school buses. You know how your grandparents used to lie to you a little bit and say they had to walk to school uphill both ways? Well, in certain parts of the country, that was about 75% true because black kids had to wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and walk to school while their white colleagues got to ride those separate but equal buses. And so they sued the school superintendent. That case was known as Briggs v. Elliott. It was the first case filed in the landmark collection of cases known as Brown versus we're going to wake up this morning. Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka. Boy, this is like on Abby's show. I got to educate y'all as I go. Come on. Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. And the unique part about Brown was Chief Justice got a very rare unanimous opinion in Brown in which he held that segregation causes a sense of inferiority by placing children in environments not conducive to learning. Think about that holding. Segregation causes a sense of inferiority by placing children in environments not conducive to learning. That was the holding in Brown. Now again, ask yourself that very simple question: how far have we come? And as you go out and you do your daily task, as we're being consumed by this urgency of now, and you think back to George Elmore, who gave up literally everything he had so that he would have access to that ballot box, so he'd have access to that franchise. But yet and still, we live in communities where young people don't know or understand the price that was paid, or even more importantly, we live in states and communities where people are trying to make that right more difficult, if not even take it away. I remind you that if it wasn't so important, they wouldn't work so damn hard to take it from you. Ask yourself that very simple question: how far have we come? When you think about people like Sarah Mae Fleming, who just wanted access to public transportation, and hear me now, just wanted access to public transportation, but now we live in communities where kids go to school where their heating and air don't work, and where people don't have access to first-class housing or affordable housing, where they don't have access to clean water. What if I told you there were 100 cities in these United States that had less potable water than Flint, Michigan? Again, ask yourself that very simple question: how far have we come? And then Harry and Eliza Briggs just wanted their kids to have access to school buses. But now kids are punished because of the zip code that they're born into. Teachers are overworked and underpaid. We're not preparing an entire generation of young people for a 21st century global economy. I'm not Kyrie Irving, but I do ascribe to the notion of Thomas Friedman that the world is flat. Not like you're gonna fall off the edge, but fundamentally the world is flat. Because now when you graduate from a school in, we're in Brooklyn, where we at?
Brooklyn.
But now when you graduate from a school in Brooklyn, or a school in Denmark, South Carolina, or a school in Long Island, you're no longer competing with a kid who graduates from school in Detroit, Michigan, or Los Angeles, California. You're now competing with kids who graduated in the UAE, in Johannesburg, South Africa, because fundamentally the world is flat. And we're not preparing young people for this new 21st century global economy. So again, ask yourself that very simple question: how far have we come? And the unique part about framing the question as such is because if you have a hint of intellectual honesty, it doesn't matter if you are Democrat or Republican, black or white, from New York or from South Carolina, the answer is always the same. We have made a great deal of progress in this country. And for those of you all who don't acknowledge the progress, you're about as dishonest as the rest of them. Right. We've made a great deal of progress in this country. The change happens when people try to put a period at the end of that sentence instead of a ... We've made a great deal of progress in this country, but we still have yet a ways to go. And so after you answer that first question, while we're talking about the now, you have to answer the next question, which is, where do we go from here? Now, this question, it bothers me, and I have really, really bad anxiety. I have like a general anxiety disorder, but I don't have like anxiety where like I can't go on stage or go on TV. I don't get frightened. In fact, I love it. I tell people before speeches I either listen to Young Jeezy or Marvin Sapp. I'm complicated. Don't worry about that. I don't mind any of that, but my anxiety bothers me at night. You know, right after you say your now Alanis. Y'all know what those are? I have to ask, because y'all didn't know what the scripture was. And so after I say my now Alanis, it's that time of night where you lay down and the only thing you can really hear is every creak in your house, and you can hear like the ice maker go off, and you can just see your stomach rise. It's pitch black, and you can just see your stomach rise into the sheets from your every breath that you take, and that's when my thoughts go crazy. Ayala Gonzalez is a friend of mine, and she says that my anxiety is when my thoughts are left in my head without adult supervision. And one of the questions that drives me crazy at night is this question of where do we go from here? I'm reminded, because I've already introduced you all to King, and so I'll stay here with it, but I'm reminded of his second best piece of writing. We've already, kind of discarded the I Have a Dream speech, but his first best piece of writing was the letter from the Birmingham jail. If anybody don't believe that, we'll just fight after this. His second best piece of writing was a small book entitled Where Do We Go From Here? It's a book you can read on a singular flight. But the reason that book is so important for now is because he gave us two choices. And Dr. King understood that you can't give people, as leaders, you all should all understand that you can't give people a lot of choices. I mean, people will trip over themselves with choices. So King was always fascinating because he would only give people two choices. And he said that the answer to the question, where do we go from here, lies in two choices: chaos or community. Think about that, chaos or community. I think last night on TV we talked about warships, or what were we doing? We were using airstrikes in the Caribbean Sea. We talked about the firing of the Arts Commission. I don't know, I can't even remember what we talked about last night. That's how fast the world is moving. I already read the news this morning. But you can't help but believe that we're on the brink of chaos. Isn't that what it feels like? Every single day. But the challenge for everybody under the sound of my voice is that we have to really focus on building community. And so I'll tell you a quick story, and then I will cede my time to any questions that you all may have. A young man was born at 633 Frederick Street in the big city of Denmark. When he was 10 years old, something happened that fundamentally changed his life in 1955. 1955, he would always say the strongest woman he ever knew was a woman named Mamie Till, because she decided she was going to have an open casket for her son, Emmett. She had an open casket in a room much like this, and the casket was laid out in front of the room. If you haven't seen the pictures, what I think the acronym is NSFW. You just Google Emmett Till casket photo, and you'll see a young 13-year-old boy with his face so brutally beaten that it looks like a pancake. But Mamie wanted the world to see what racism, hate, and bigotry had done to her boy. And so she had this open casket. And back before you could go viral on Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, you went viral in Ebony magazine. And I don't have to explain that to this audience. And so this young boy from Denmark actually ripped that picture out of Ebony and put it in his wallet, and it helped spur his activism. He's a part of what's called the Emmett Till generation. He led little marches and sit-ins in Denmark, but his parents were middle class and they wanted him to get out of the movement. So this is where the story has a heavy dose of irony. To get him out of the movement, his parents sent him to Howard University, which makes sense to no one. And then to compound their mistake, when he got to Howard University, he befriended a young man and became roommates with a young man named Stokely Carmichael. And Stokely actually graduated from Howard, but then convinced this young man from Denmark to drop out of school. And he did. He dropped out of school, and they went to Raleigh, North Carolina, and they helped found this little small fledgling civil rights organization. With all due respect to everyone under the sound of my voice, the baddest civil rights organization ever lived. It was called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC, and they got paid $8 a week. And his first mission was to go to Miami, University of Ohio. I don't know if we have anybody in this room from Ohio. I didn't see it. That's why we don't take y'all nowhere. And we tired of y'all sending all y'all conservative white folk to South Carolina. But he went to Miami, University of Ohio. It's a little small footnote in this country's civil rights history that a lot of people don't know, but that is where civil rights workers went to train for Freedom Summer. And so while he was at Miami, University of Ohio, he got a phone call that 3 of his friends had gone missing, Goodman, Schroeder, and Cheney. And so he went down to Philadelphia, Mississippi. Now, how many people have been to Philadelphia, Mississippi in this room? And it's the size of this conference room, am I lying? And during the day, they hid in barns and sheds, and at night they went out and looked in ditches and trenches. And ironically enough, he led the search mission where they found these 3 bodies, but they were behind the home of one of the local sheriff's deputies and ministers in the town. And that was this young man from Denmark's first indoctrination into the movement. He finally became National Field Director and National Program Secretary for SNCC under both John Lewis and Stokely Carmichael. And then he came back home to South Carolina and became involved in the most deadly civil rights demonstration this country's ever seen. And I share this story all around the world because even you all in this room, a lot of you all don't even know what the most deadly civil rights demonstration this country has ever seen is. Because on the night of February 6, 1968, the students at South Carolina State College, as it was known at the time, decided they were going to protest the All-Star Bowling Alley. It sits back in a right angle. And what was supposed to happen was 3 students were supposed to go into the bowling alley and take a knee. They were going to get arrested. And, well, you're sneaking up on me in these times. And ain't nobody else jump up. I was like, I'm up, just stand over here. They were supposed to go in and take a knee, and they were going to be arrested. They were going to fight these injustices in the court of law. But what happened was they didn't know that city police were already inside of the bowling alley. They didn't know that as they got louder and they were tucked into this right angle, the police would surround them like they did. And then as they began to clap and chant and sing protest hymns, the police began to press up against them. And then they pressed up against the glass, and then the glass broke and all hell broke loose. And South Carolina State Troopers began to beat the students, but they beat them not with normal police batons, but batons that were about this long. And at the end, they had these leather rawhide whips. And John Stroman would always tell the story about seeing two state troopers hold one young co-ed, as they called her, while another one beat her. And the students that night, they had to go back to their campus and heal not only their physical wounds, but their mental wounds and emotional wounds as well. And then came February 7th, 1968. I think older folk had the saying that the tension was so thick you can cut it with a knife, but my partner in the back will understand this. I compare it to like when Clark is playing Morehouse and you in the parking lot after the game and you feel like something about to pop off, but nothing happened. But then came that fateful day of February 8th, 1968, when the students went back to their campus. I think that's an important note in this story. They went back to their campus. They went back to their campus because they felt safe in their communion. They felt safe in their numbers, but they did not foresee what would happen next. They did not foresee that South Carolina State Troopers would line up along the embankment in front of their beloved campus. They did not foresee that they would close ranks like they did. They did not foresee that they would have shotguns that were loaded with deadly double-aught buckshots of the same bullets we used to hunt deer. And they did not foresee that it would be turned on them with deadly intent. And for 8 seconds, shots were fired. 1001, 1002, 1003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Shots were fired into a group of students. It killed 3. Henry Smith, Samuel Hammond, and Delano Middleton, and wounded another 28. The funny part about looking at faces like this in an audience in awe, as if this is the first time that you've heard this story, is that we are at one of the most storied civil rights organizations in the country, and we're still learning about the history of the shoulders upon which we stand. 3 young men, Henry Smith, Samuel Hammond, and Delano Middleton, were killed that night. 28 others were wounded. This young man from Denmark got shot in the shoulder, went to the infirmary, and they told him his wound was too bad. He had to go to the hospital, and when he got to the hospital, he was pointed out by the only black sheriff's deputy in Orangeburg County at the time. He was arrested. They deemed him to be an outside agitator. They charged him with 5 felony counts, and he was looking at a maximum of 75 years in prison. The unique legal aspect of this story is this was the first time that law enforcement officers were charged with federal civil rights crimes for shooting unarmed black folk. And they were all found not guilty. This young man from Denmark went to trial some 4 or 5 years later. The lead investigator from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division said that because of the time that had passed, he had misplaced most of the evidence. However, he did remember this young man not on the night of the 8th, but on the night of the 6th, standing on top of a fire truck, lighting a bick and saying, "Burn, baby, burn." And so his indictment was backdated from February 8th to February 6th, and all of his charges were dismissed except for one. And he was charged, tried, and convicted of rioting. And he became the first and only one-man riot in the history of this country. On that night, injustice had left mothers without their sons. It left the pages of our country's history stained red with blood. But if you look at that young man from Denmark today who ended up serving a year, day for day, of hard labor, and you ask him what's the greatest sacrifice he had to make, if you see him today and you see that his eyes don't pop like they used to from shedding so many tears, or his shoulders aren't as upright as they once were from carrying the burdens of so many generations, and you ask him, what's the greatest sacrifice he had to make? He'll tell you it wasn't being in jail or losing his freedom. It wasn't even being housed on death row, which is where they housed him after they denied his bond, just to add a little salt to the wound. But the greatest sacrifice he had to make was being in jail for the birth of his oldest daughter, or my big sister. Because this young man who grew into a civil rights hero is my father, Dr. Cleveland Sellers. And the lessons that I learned from people like Henry Smith and Samuel Hammond and Delano Middleton and Jimmy Lee Jackson and Judy Richardson and Marion Barry and Julian Bond and all of those names of those heroes and heroines, even before you get to the Martins, Malcolms, and Roses, is that the answer to the question, where do we go from here, lies fundamentally in the ability for this room to do 2 things. The first is we have to rededicate ourselves to being a people of dreamers. Somewhere along the line, we lost the fact that we are a visionary people. that we could think about those things unseen and try to cultivate them with our faith, because when we came to this country, faith is so fascinating. We were stripped of literally everything, and all we had was one word. You make it complicated, but all we had was our faith. And that faith made us a people of dreamers, and somewhere along the line we forgot that, so I remind people often we have to rededicate ourselves to dreaming with our eyes open. And the second thing is more difficult, because I now know only 10% of y'all go to churches, so, but down south we have this saying that he ain't done with us yet. And so I want you to understand this is more aspirational. I hate when people speak to you like they complete the task that they're talking about. But we have to learn how to love our neighbors. But I'm not done yet. I see you clapping, I appreciate it, but I'm not done yet. Because we have to dedicate ourselves to loving our neighbors even when they don't love us. And that's a very special type of love. That's a very burdensome, difficult type of love. But it's also a very necessary type of love for this moment that we're in now. So if you think about this as you're going down this path, as we're talking about this journey of understanding this fierce urgency of now, and you ask yourself, how far have we come? You know that we've made progress, but we still have yet a ways to go. And then you ask, where do we go from here? I think the answer is very easy, but it's built around two pillars. Dreaming with your eyes open and loving your neighbors even when they don't love you. I think then and only then can we move effectively in this space that we're in. This space that is consumed by so much grief, turmoil, and darkness. But I do believe this one thing. I believe only when it's darkest can you see the stars. And although it's dark as hell right now, I have faith in the stars that I see in rooms like this, that we will be okay. So with that, I say thank you, God bless, and let's take a few questions.
Awesome. As we start the process of
okay, and these are very important. The first is questions have question marks. Some of y'all get up and start giving your own speech. So questions have question marks. And number two is, I don't know why we started this, teaching people this, but there is a such thing as dumb questions, okay? And I don't know how we started, because I think we've all realized, we've been around people that have asked dumb questions before. But for some reason, people teach things differently than that, and those are just the two rules that I like to level set with. We got one right here in the middle, and one over there.
We actually have one here, so state your name, your affiliate, and your question.
Hi, my name is Stanisha Holmes, or most people just call me Stan, and I'm from the Austin affiliate. And please forgive me, I don't mean to be so pessimistic, but haven't had enough coffee to be optimistic just yet, but I'm gonna get there today. As we talk about, like, and I've heard this a lot, talk about hope, and that we have the hope, and we need to mobilize and create community and those types of things. But I still keep seeing where we are today, and it's kind of ironic that we're constantly talking about 1950, 1960, and we're in 2025, and still having the same issues of 1950 and 1960. And one of the things that I tell my 19-year-old daughter is, well, we have to vote. State and local elections are where change is actually made, and we have to vote. But it's really, really hard with this new generation to get them to understand, why we vote. And so we'd love to hear your take on that as to, because I'm sure you've heard the question before too, why should we vote? Why?
So I hear you. I'll deal with the first 75% of your question, which is kind of rooted in a level of pessimism. What you gonna do, give up? Like, I think that, yeah, I'm gonna be kind of difficult on you, because I'm assuming that you have just oozing with talent, right? I mean, you're in this room, and your talent and treasures are necessary to help us put our shoulder to the wheel to get out the ditch. And I think that, first of all, everybody's not going to be a part of this journey to change. There's some people who are going to have 2 Teslas and live in a gated neighborhood, and that's okay. You know, people talk about the civil rights movement all the time, and if you meet somebody above 60, they all talk about how they march with King, when in all honesty, only 1 out of 10 of them was actually there. All right? I read a fascinating autobiography on Condoleezza Rice, and her parents were Baptist ministers in Birmingham, Alabama, who despised Dr. King. They were a part of the group of pastors, black pastors and ministers that King was writing the letter to the Birmingham jail about. And so I think about that dichotomy all the time. You guys are not going to be in this journey with a lot of folk by your side. In fact, leadership is very, very lonely. But I believe that there are people who toiled in the vineyard who literally bled and laid on jailhouse floors so that you could be in seats like this. And it's hard for me to simply say that our journey is complete. I think that there was a level of completion that you all thought for some reason. I thought that there was a level of accomplishment that we thought for some reason, and that bred this level of comfortability. I don't know if it happened with Barack Obama. I don't know if it happened when we reached some status of middle class belongings, but we thought that this journey or movement was over, and we are just reconciling with the fact that democracy is extremely fragile. Extremely fragile. And even more importantly, we're reconciling with the fact that many of the achievements that we made between 1954 and 2020 were also extremely fragile because they could be taken away from you as quickly as you gain. For young people, however, I ain't worried about your 19-year-old. I'm actually more worried about you than her. And the reason being is because I go to Applebee's a lot. I heard some judgment, but I go to Applebee's a lot, and I like going to Applebee's. And we have an Applebee's in Columbia, South Carolina that's near our veterans hospital. And I don't know if y'all ever been to like an Applebee's or Chili's or Hooters or something near a veterans hospital, but they get some of the most intense, wildest conversations I've ever been a part of my life. And the reason I go to Applebee's is because there are 2 reasons. 1, they leave me alone. And 2, they pour their liquor like it's not their own. I don't know if y'all went to that little bar downstairs and they pour you like a little bit of liquor. Like they gonna run out. But at Applebee's, they just be pouring. And I was talking to my bartender the other day, and I said, what year were you born? She said, I was born in 2000 and I said, and there's more. And I began to think about a young person born in 2000, and then if you deduce this real quickly, they've lived through 9/11, a housing crisis, a financial crisis, the election of the first black president, the creation of the Tea Party, re-election of the first black president. They've lived through Parkland, they've lived through Fort Hood, they've lived through a church shooting that killed my good friend Clemente Pinckney in Charleston, South Carolina. They lived through a synagogue shooting. They lived through the election of Donald Trump. They've lived through COVID, which is a once-in-a-100-year pandemic. They've lived through the precipice of World War III. They've lived through Russia invading Ukraine. They've lived through Israel and Gaza. They lived through the re-election of Donald Trump, and they're still here. And they've done all of that under the auspices of social media and comments and the pressures that come along with it. And some of y'all in here are still afraid that y'all's face is going to appear in that Hulu documentary on Freaknik. And so I am really not that generation that your daughter is a part of. At 19 years old, they've lived through generations of trauma in 2 decades, and they're still here. And I believe that while we're pressing them for certain issues, they deserve what I believe to be the most powerful word we have, which is grace. Thank you. They deserve some grace. And so I'm okay with her, because she's going to figure it out. Every movement that we've ever had in this country, women's rights, gay rights, civil rights, have all been led by young people. And so I'm okay with them figuring out their way. It's fascinating though, because people died for this doesn't work on them. They need the tangible, what our transactional vote means for me, and we have to show them that. And you were right by framing the conversation around what happens at your state and local level. You know, your mayor's the person who appoints your police chief. So when your friend gets pulled over and harassed, this is the direct correlation. You know, what you're doing in school, the long hours, or the seat belts on school buses, or your school lunch is determined by your school board, or who picks your superintendent, or whether or not you get new cheerleading uniforms, X, Y, Z. All of these things matter and have a correlation, so she's gonna be all right. I'm more worried about you than her. Question. Yeah. Yes.
All right, so second question, name, affiliate, and your question.
Leonard Moore, Austin, Texas, but Cleveland is my spiritual home. Quick question, what do we do when the political goals of the black elite collide with the political goals of the urban poor?
That's not new. I mean, there's nothing about that dichotomy between that black elite and the urban poor. I mean, we've had these discussions before. I mean, we've had Du Bois, right? I mean, we've had Booker T. I mean, these are legendary debates which only make our community stronger. I do think, though, that there is an ability for us to have a meeting of the minds where I always tell people who I roll with that we have to do a better job of meeting people where they are. And in particular in rooms like this, you all have to do a better job of shutting up, right? I think we talk too much. And I think that we believe that instead of listening to the concerns, and I'll take black men as the best example, instead of listening to the holistic concerns of black men in our community, we rather talk at them. And usually by talking at them, we tune out, particularly younger black men between the ages of 18 and 40, 45. And so we have discussions around black men in the political spectrum of things such as criminal justice reform, marijuana reform. But very rarely do we have conversations with groups of black men talking about, I don't know, early childhood education or access to small business funds. Very rarely do we have conversations with black men about African American female mortality, which is my #1 political issue. And it's important because when you go into those labor and delivery rooms, you have to know that you have to be the biggest advocate for your loved one who is giving birth, right? And so we don't really have these holistic policy discussions. So it's important for people like us who are apostles of truth or apostles of hope, that if we're going to play that role between that black elite and the urban poor, we're actually listening to what those people are going through. I got a brother named Pop. Not my real brother, but y'all know everybody has a brother. You grew up with him. And Pop just texted me the other day. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick, because it was a fascinating conversation and I want to get it right. He said, after he was asking me about my family, he was like, can you help me with some food for Thanksgiving, because we got no EBT this month, right? So what do we do to, how do we listen to that? And instead of immediately saying, well, he ain't got no job, we just kind of meet the needs where they are, because it's not about him, it's about the community that he is trying to build around him. And sometimes we find ourselves struggling or consumed in that moment, which is why I just gave that entire speech. And I also think that some of these dichotomies, like the black intellectualism versus the urban poor, are somewhat mythical. Because when I go in a barbershop, I have a law degree, but I'm not teaching them or talking to them with any level of expertise unless they ask me a legal question. I'm just a 100%, I won't say that word, I'll be chastised by some of y'all. I'm just a black dude from that community when I go in there and I am around people who look like me, who come from where I come from, and who have many of the same problems. Because I think at the end of the day, there's certain things, and some of you all may not ascribe to this, but I always think that there is it's kind of like, you're a football fan, right? I'm assuming you like the Browns? Absolutely. That's terrible. So, you know how they ask football players, you're welcome to the NFL moment? Like, when was the first time, what hit was it, or what happened? It's kind of like, when did you first realize you were black? And there's some people who straddle that black intellectual line who have not had that welcome to our neighborhood type moment. And I always tell people that it's going to come. It always does.
All right, next question.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay, Gail Jones Carson, Memphis Urban League. So I want to thank you for mentioning all the things that these young people have been through. I never thought about that. I mean, they have absolutely been through a lot. But you said that you're not, so let me say, young people came out in 2008 to vote for Barack. They did not return in 2012. In Memphis and Shelby County, if we get 5% of the young people to vote, we are doing good. You're not concerned about them because they've been through so much, but when are they going to wake up and realize the value of voting? We need them to vote.
when you give them something to vote for.
Oh, so all that they've been through is not enough?
So we're talking about two different groups of people. So in 2008, we're talking about millennial voters, like what I am.
Okay.
So millennial voters, that's a different, that's a whole totally different generation than a 19-year-old right now. So millennial voters, that's us, that's me. How many millennials are in the room? Some of y'all lying, but that's fine. That's this. Millennials, stand up real quick so she can see this difference.
Okay, so what year were they?
One second. So these are millennial voters. How many of y'all voted for Barack Obama? Okay, so that's everybody. How many of y'all voted for Barack Obama twice? Okay, so that's everybody. So that's, thank you guys for this experience.
But what year were the millennials born? What year does it start?
I don't know, 81 to 94? 81 to 94. Her daughter was born yesterday. I don't know how old 19 is. Her daughter was 2 years old when Barack Obama was born. So I mean, when Barack Obama was elected. And so, but I do hear your question, and my answer remains the same. So this belief that an election is happening next Tuesday, y'all should feel a responsibility to vote, is no more. Okay? You should just go out and vote because it's your responsibility. Don't work no more. You're talking about getting 18-year-olds to vote, and y'all don't even realize NBA YoungBoy is like a god to these kids. I went to a YoungBoy concert the other night, and there were, I just wanted to say the two letters that people get mad about, but there were young people crying at this concert. They were literally, I took my nieces and nephews and we had a suite, and there was one dude down there from Lancaster, South Carolina. He was every bit of 19, 20 years old, just crying when he came out on the stage. Said, man, he speak to me. I was like, what are you going through? Please tell me, we all need to be in therapy together. But this generation is just vastly different, and it's not the responsibility, it's not the onus, because they are that far removed from that battle. And so what I'm telling you is that we have to show them and give them a reason why. We owe it to them. We owe it to them to connect those dots. And we've been taking it for granted for so long that all we do is go in communities after Labor Day and have a fish fry, or we stand up in church and say, look, the election's in 2 weeks, we're gonna gas at the church buses, y'all wanna ride, we'll pick you up. That doesn't necessarily work anymore with this new generation. I'm not worried about y'all in this room. And I'm not worried about black women over the age of 45. I'm just not. Y'all gonna show up, you do it all the time. I'm just talking about getting that new group of voters that you're talking about, educating them on the process, educating them on the results, meeting them where they are. And if you want to do something very simple, which I don't know why y'all ain't think about yet, is like adopt your local high school and go in there and make sure that every senior is registered to vote. You get their information, and while you're doing that, you can also bring other people in there to talk to them while they're there. I mean, it's like not, you go in and they'll be able to see, if they're able to see them, right? They have to be able to see them in the transaction. Voting is more of a transaction for young people than anything else. And they have to be able to see themselves in the benefit, because right now, they will literally tell you that Democrats and Republicans have done the same thing for them and their families. Because they're still going through the same things. They don't feel as if they've gotten out of the ditch yet. And so I think that it's inch by inch, day by day, by meeting them where they are, I think that you will be surprised by the growth that you see out of them and the change. Because at the end of the day, they are so intellectually curious. And they consume news in different ways. I thought I was going to stop talking about this question, but they consume news in different ways. Ain't nobody watching no hour-long program on CNN or MSNBC, but they know everything going on because it comes across in TikTok. It's 30 to 45 seconds. Or they're getting it on Instagram Reels. My daughter is 20 years old. She goes to Howard. I always joke, I guess she couldn't get in the spell. But I guess, anyway. And so she sends me news all the time. And the news that she sends me is a comprehensive clip of the question that she's asking me in 45 seconds. And so, you know, it's just a different, it's a different environment that we have to do a better job of. And that's don't yell at me for this because I want you to invite me back, but that's one of my larger issues with Chuck and Akeem. because I want to make sure that they are prepared for this moment. Because it's moving in a different way. And the things we did to elect Barack Obama in 2008 don't even work today. And we have leaders, we have very, very, very good leaders for 2010, very good leaders for 2015. The question is, are they very good leaders for the moment that we're in today? Yes. What's up, man?
Hey, what's going on, brother? First of all, Darius Baker from Atlanta, Georgia, with the Urban League of Greater Atlanta. And Bakari, man, it's a journey, you know, and I appreciate you, brother, from 20 years ago at Morehouse. I appreciate everything you've been doing for the U.S., for your state, to represent the culture, and it's a pleasure, you know, to have you here today. And my question really goes into what we've seen now with the political shift is that there is a streamline of messaging from one side that seems to be able to hit the target. It seems to be able to galvanize the base. It seems to be able to galvanize the youth who are now, you know, really on the brink of if I should vote, where I should go, everything that you just mentioned. And I believe that my question more so stems from what is that strategy from our side, or what is that consistent messaging that we're going to start putting out towards these next elections that's going to be able to have that headliner like they have from the other side, to be able to galvanize people at the drop of a dime, or to be able to get those internal motors going as they've been able to do on the other side?
Yeah, one of the things, great question. We went to college together, so don't ask him anything about me. Pre-2005. I was a wild boy back in the HC. So part of the concept of meeting people where they are is that your question actually, it unfolds a lot that we get wrong. Because a lot of us have a very good message, but a lot of us are the wrong messenger. I think that one of the